Welcome to the BWI Live recruiting show. Just like Penn State's recruiting, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties this morning. I apologize for being a little bit late here to start. It's that good old State College internet, the Wi-Fi. Fitz is going to be joining us in just 1 second, but of course, it's a recruiting show, so Ryan Snyder, Sean Fitz, myself, we're going to be talking about Penn State football recruiting here on this particular iteration of the show, but a lot of focus on the game as well because Ryan, just the general state of recruiting doesn't seem great at the moment. What's kind of the vibe here heading into the weekend?
As you would expect it to be. What are we, are we almost 4 weeks now? Almost 4 weeks now. I
can't keep track.
It'll be 4 on Sunday since Franklin, its firing was announced. So I think it's kind of what you would expect at this point. Most of the guys who are truly going to open things up have done so by now. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't be shocked if you see another trickle out before the end of the month, but there's also a handful of guys who want to hold on and wait as long as possible, and those guys are going to keep taking visits elsewhere. For the most part, it was a pretty slow week, and I think that makes sense, right? We're a couple weeks past the initial shock. We're in that middle period now, or maybe another week or two. It's kind of wait and see mode, and then hopefully when you get to the back half of the month, these guys can start. Maybe news starts to trickle out when it comes to who's the favorite or whatever it may be.
Yeah, where are we in the high school playoff calendar? So are some of these guys, their season's ending and now they can be a little more active maybe?
Yeah.
And so is that going to be part of the conversation over the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think for the most part, top prospects on quality teams are going to be playing for another couple of weeks. District 3, for example, locally here got going last week, but the bigger schools really get going this week. There's only a couple games last week, and out in the Whitfield, it's kind of similar. Most games started last week, but really this week it starts kicking off with a lot of the quarterfinals, and that'll go for another 2 or 3 weeks. So you usually see that back half of November where guys start to trickle out as far as playoff attrition and add some visits here and there. But for the most part, a lot of Penn State's guys are on quality teams that are going to keep playing here for another week or two at least.
So we'll get into some of the recruiting news a little bit later, but I do want to get to practice last night because I'm now finding this infinitely interesting on the offensive side of the ball. When Fitz joins us, you can talk about the defense because that's how we set up on our Wednesday practices. So let's get to that. You got to win, guys. You got to win. There he is. We got him. We got him back on the show. Sean Fitz here to talk about the defensive side of the ball. I can go first if you want to get settled in, Fitz, but because the offensive side of the ball has been infinitely fascinating since the bye week, since Terry Smith took over as the interim head coach. So do you want to go first, or do you want me to play the highlights and then give some of my thoughts from yesterday?
Yeah, I want to hear your thoughts because you look at the offense and say it's fascinating, but also at the same time, what we see on Saturday is not as much.
No.
Let's hash that one out. Go ahead with your segment.
So they have been doing a significant amount of hiding of things during practice intentionally. When we've been inside, they've tried to screen us from their install period with the offensive receivers and quarterbacks because they needed that week during the Ohio State lead up to get some more new stuff installed after the bye week. And then this week, the quarterbacks and the starting running backs were inside once again while the rest of the team was outside. But they also did special teams to start practice. So we're back into, they're showing us special teams, which is not, nearly as interesting to see field goals in as it would be to see pass patterns and throwing and catching and things like that. So the quarterbacks came out late, and then it was just one quarterback. It was just Ethan Grunkmeyer, and then Jack Lambert was not with the offensive starters. He was not with the guys who were inside. He was with the scout team who was working the entire time separate from the field goal unit, working on passing. And so we got a long look at Jack Lambert. We got a long look at some of the guys who are in the D squad. And that was about it. And of course, you can see here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, we got to see the tight ends. So they got back into a semi-normal rhythm once they came out of the quarterbacks and running backs working through what would be in the progression handoff drills. And I don't know if they were just inside because they needed more room. That part has been interesting to me because when they were inside, they were installing and they didn't want us to see that. what are they doing where it's just the running backs and just the quarterbacks that they need to be with the doors closed inside with, roughly about six players, because we didn't see the running backs, but we did see some of the D squad players, and the receivers were outside as well. Offensive line was working with the special teams on field goal. So kind of a head scratcher, honestly, from the offensive practice field, but there is definitely different stuff happening. And so that's kind of the takeaway from practice is like, okay, what are they cooking up? I know the players involved. Obviously, we don't know what it is. And I don't know. That's kind of where we are after week 11 of this. Fitz, how about the defensive side of the ball?
The mystery box could be anything. It could be even be throwing downfield. No, I think we're no, not that.
Anything but that.
Okay. Well, you and I we were joking when we left the field last night about flea flickers, and I was like, maybe that's if it's just the quarterbacks and the running backs, maybe that's what they're practicing. Handing the ball off and then tossing it back and then throwing as far as they can. Because I think as much as I hate to say it, as much as I hate to watch it this year, the trickery might be something to fall back on this weekend because Indiana's a heck of a football team. So, yeah, I mean, you're looking at a November practice, which actually I thought from the defensive side of things, a little bit more physical than we're used to seeing this late in the season. I think that's mostly because Penn State's tackling has been very bad, and Penn State's ability to get off blocks and disengage, which was really a big focus of the defensive line last night, was that was pretty much what they were looking for. The D-backs on the far field were actually tackling, like taking guys almost to the ground, but onto a pad instead of anything else. But live, I mean, which is good to see. So I think they're going to need it this weekend. Indiana's going to try and spread them out, going to try and go downfield, going to try and run through them, going to try and do a little bit of everything and really not cut themselves off as Ohio State did last week in terms of controlling the tempo, being slow-natured, I guess you would say. Ohio State, you score 38 points, but at the end of the day, that's a really talented offense who could probably have done more, but they're choosing to do that, and it's not just a Penn State thing. They've done that against every team in their schedule. Indiana, I don't think is that way. I think Indiana will, if they have an opportunity to run up the score, can try to run up the score this weekend. Kurt Cignetti's a Pittsburgh guy, but he's not a Penn State guy. There you go.
Yeah.
So, but defensively, a lot of what we've seen in the past. Terry Smith was asked about it after practice. Steve Frank, I don't know if you have the audio or anything like that, if we're doing between the lines, but he was asked about the energy, and he mentioned, hey, it's a teaching period. The energy was good for the entire practice. So we will see see how that goes. If Penn State loses on Saturday, I don't think it has anything to do with energy on practice at Wednesday night in a 10-minute.
Yeah, especially again when I was mentioning like half of it was field goal, and this has also been kind of their scale back as the season goes on, sort of the way they re-engineer practice as they get later in the year and trying to preserve guys' bodies. And now obviously the tackling is different on that side of the ball, and some of the things they do on the other side were the same. But yeah, it's always so hard to measure those sort of things, but it's somebody's perception out there, and so that's part of the conversation this week. I want to move on. Was there anything else from practice? I like I said, I shot all I had, and I put it up here on the YouTube channel.
No, I missed the lion cat conversation there.
This is a great conversation because they call it the lion cat instead of the wild cat, and I said that makes me cringe so much. It's not the wild lion, it's the lion cat, and I think they should call it the thunder cat. I just think that would be a way better name because it gets to both things. It's a run play, it's physical, and it's a name that people are familiar with if you were born in the 80s or 90s at least.
Or and translated, lion cat is cat. So that to me is what it comes down to. So
yeah, I don't love that. It's I'm not a stickler on ATM machine or anything like that, but yeah, lion cat's a little bit chai tea. So anyway, Fitz, I want to keep with you as well and discuss the Penn State. I love chai, by the way. The Penn State coaching search. You had an article about that recently. Again, I like the way you've been trying to, with the information that's out there and with what's real, give different perspectives on what is going on and how you can kind of filter and sort and stack these candidates. So what was this week's filter on the coaching staff to give Penn State fans a new insight into the coaching search?
I love data. Data it can tell you a lot. It can tell you a lot about where these names would come onto the list and where these names would kind of slide on the list. If you're talking about, everybody likes to highlight the Franklin 4-21 record. Well, that's below average, but also what is average there? And it's not great. So I kind of expanded it, top 25 wins. By the way, Kalen DeBoer is a hell of a coach, man. Like, you look at what he's done at the NAIA level, and then beyond that, like with Fresno State. So he walked into COVID year at Fresno State, went 3-3, then went 9-3. 9-3 is really hard to do at Fresno State. And then he went to Washington, and I think it was 26-3 over 2 years. I mean, that is incredible. It is, it was kind of like that conversation when Saban retired is, why this guy? Because he's an outsider. He's coming from the West Coast and everything like that. The guy can flat out coach. And I think that's pretty impressive, especially when you stack him up against what's going out there, because you're looking at an entire resume. We talk about these guys week to week as if it is the referendum on their candidacy. Like, remember when Matt Rule lost to Minnesota? That was, that was it, whatever.
Yep.
But you got to look
one game sample size.
Yeah. I mean, and hey, those things matter. Like, I'm not washing them to the side or anything like that, but it's a bigger resume and it's a bigger picture when you take a look at where these guys are doing it. Clark Lee at Vanderbilt, was not good. And then Diego Pavia got there, but now he's really good. It's like, how do you manage that? And how do you take the feedback from not just the people around the Vanderbilt program, but the people who have been around him in the past? And I think that's what Pat Kraft is trying to do right now, because if you're looking at this coaching search, this was a quieter week so far. And I think that is accurate in terms of how this one is being handled. I think we're maybe halfway there, looking at the entire thing. I mean, there's no timeline here, but looking at the entire process so far. And I think that's kind of fascinating when you talk about what's all on board, what can look like a great thing cannot be a great thing. What can look like an average job someone's doing. Manny's doing wonderful at Duke. That's different than what he did at Miami. It's everything is so crazy, and everything is on its own curve. And I think that's what's crazy about this coaching search is you've got to find the right guy. And I think the obvious ones out there, Mike Elko is doing a hell of a job at Texas A&M, did a very good job at Duke. Texas A&M, despite all the resources, still a very tough place to win because they haven't ever. Like, they've always been the second child in that state, maybe even third sometimes. So that's one. Kalen DeBoer, of course, at Alabama, said it a couple of weeks ago. He's an outsider there, so I think his rope is a little bit shorter. But at the same time, you see his resume. You look at his resume. You're like, it's just a matter of time until this guy wins big. Could have really used that South Carolina win if you're Pat Kraft, but neither here nor there. So it's fun to look at this and say, this guy or candidate A. He's done a lot of winning at a lower level. He's stepped up and he's done some good things and kind of leveled off when he got to the top. Well, there's only 15 jobs at the top that in this group that Penn State's in right now, with LSU's out there, Florida's out there, and things like that. Those are upper echelon jobs, and they're really hard. And there's no way of knowing until this guy gets here and gets a year or two in how it's going to work. I mean, you didn't know. Like, everybody loves Dan Lanning. You didn't know Dan Lanning was going to work at Oregon. Kenny Dillingham, same at Arizona State. But then you've also had guys that have gone and been successful from head coach to head coaching job. So, I mean, it's just, it's all, first off, it's all noise right now. Like, you're reading a lot of things that aren't happening. This is my channeling Nate right now. You're reading a lot of things that aren't happening, but they continue to sort of grind away, and you sort of whittle that list down, take some big swings, keep the other guys warm, and that's how a coaching search works.
Ryan, and this is kind of just a general statement, but it's interesting how Fitz described everything's on a different curve for each school and each program's history, etc. It just goes to show, like, college football is not standard across the board. It is not like an even playing field no matter where you go. And I imagine recruiting is kind of the same way. So have you been looking at, and I know you've been focused on Penn State recruiting, but would you focus on the way a guy has done in the recruiting space at a lower level, like to gauge a guy's recruiting chops? I guess, how do you go about doing that, considering, Manny Diaz recruiting at Miami is wildly different than Duke or when he was a coordinator at Penn State? However you might phrase these things, how does recruiting fit into the picture for you?
So for me personally, that's a topic or an avenue I feel like in a week or two when things narrow down, hopefully, I want to explore more, because right now, we're talking about 10 plus different guys out here. Like, there's a million different ways you can look at that. So for me, that's kind of why I was waiting a little bit, another week or two, maybe, to really kind of dissect some of these guys. Like, for example, like we're going to talk about a guy I think personally, Brent Key. I think he actually would fit Penn State well. He's a Georgia Tech alum. I don't know how you'd be able to sway him, but he's done a pretty good job at bringing in younger guys who don't have the accolades of a lot of those top schools and playing them early and having success with those guys. So to me, obviously development is a big part of that, but I want to drill down on guys who have done a good job, like I said, at bringing in maybe some lower touted players, but they're getting on the field earlier. And what's that tell me? And having success, that tells me you're a good scout. That tells me you see talent that, sites like ours and others maybe aren't focused on as much so for one reason or another, they kind of go under the radar. And there's a lot of examples of that. And like I said, that's something I want to drill down a little bit more on here in the coming weeks. But I think that's the best way to kind of look at, when you're comparing a Penn State to a Georgia Tech. I mean, obviously we can compare Penn State to Alabama and Texas A&M and some of those bigger schools. And obviously they have really good results. They also have deep pockets, right? And so much about recruiting today is about money. Let's call it what it is. So if we're looking at some of those guys who are currently at schools that aren't really on Penn State's level, or some of those top SEC schools, where are we finding players who are having success early in their careers? Because one, they're being developed and coached properly, but two, this was a good scouting job. These are coaches that really were able to find talent, that again, sites like Rivals on 324/7, may have overlooked a little bit, or just not even that we looked overlooked, but, guys that weren't getting their names out there, promoting themselves, all that kind of stuff.
So we'll get more recruiting conversation in just one second, but I want to give out the things I always forget to say here on the live show, because I'm so excited to get to the Penn State football and recruiting topics. The first thing is, if you're listening to this on the podcast version, if you're on Apple, Spotify, any of the major channels, or if you're on a minor channel as well, like you listen on one of those cool underground hipster podcast players, I don't care. Please subscribe here to our feed. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. That is where we get most of our viewership, and we're trying to grow our podcast side of things, because the reason we do this show, 60 minutes, an hour of conversation with you every day, is for the podcast audience as well, because I grew up in radio, and so I want to have a conversation. I don't want to do algorithmic clickbait stuff, and we want to make sure that you are well served, and the best way we can do that is to grow the channel. Of course, you're watching here on the YouTube channel live. We got the people in the chat, 147 people watching live. Please like the video. If all of you do that right now, that is a huge help. Okay, now I need to let you know that your life could be better, and it has nothing to do with liking videos, subscribing to anything, or to listening to any more of what I have to say beyond what I have to tell you about my perfect franchise. Andy Ludicky, he's a franchise consultant. What does that mean? Well, he places people in businesses to manage. He meets with you. He finds out everything he needs to know about you, your life situation, your financial situation, your skills, what your aptitudes are, and then he finds you a franchise to manage so that, and this is the important part, you make more money. And I know that that's kind of money is uncouth to talk about. It is literally the engine that drives everything in this country. So if you want to define your life in a new second half, new chapter of your career, and you want to have more time for your family, more income, leave a legacy, diversify, whatever you want to do, take over the world. I don't know. Be the next billionaire. I don't know. That could be something you could do. 404-973-9901. Andy at myperfectfranchise.net. His services are completely free to use. So if you have business experience, this isn't for just anybody, not an idiot like me who just walks in I'd like more money, please. You need to have skills. You need to have financial backing. You need to have all those things. If that's you, you should definitely give him a call. Andy at 404-973-9901, Andy at myperfectfranchise.net, or you can talk to him on the blue-white illustrated message board. Also want to give a shout-out to our sponsor here on today's show, and that is Ann Lusk at Sotheby Realty, who have, they are all over the state of Pennsylvania, York, Harrisburg, and now Happy Valley. I was on their site earlier today just perusing because I'm super nosy. I would be one of those neighbors that's looking over their hedge at your property. So if you're considering, maybe you have kids that are coming up to state college and you want to buy a house, buy something downtown maybe, instead of shelling out money to an asset that is just poof, it's all gone. Maybe you want to buy. A lot of people do that. They buy a house so that for 4 years their kids have somewhere to live. You can check out this one, 1516 Elizabeth Road. Maybe you're looking for an investment property, or you just want to move to State College. A lot of people retire here, by the way. Like, I know a lot of people who have moved back here specifically to be Penn State super fans. So if you want to do that, this is a great place to live. Fitz and I love this place. Ryan, he defected to go back to Harrisburg. So check this out. And by the way, if you're going to buy something, maybe from Ann Lusk, you want to do it the right way, because the purchase of a home is a major life milestone and one that deserves guidance from experienced professionals like Ann Lusk and Lusk Associates and Sotheby International Realty. They're huge Penn State super fans, which is why they're here on the channel. So help support the people that support this channel if you're going to be buying a house. And I know I'm talking to one person out there, but you, the one person I'm talking to, give them a look, give them a call, because they do really great work and they can help you guide you through in a really important process. Run away from a for sale by owner sign. Give them a call at 814-808-7588 or luskandassociates.com today. Appreciate all of our sponsors here on the show. Appreciate you guys listening and appreciating them in return. Let's get back to what we were talking about with Penn State football, which is we do now have to shift to the visitor list for this weekend. And I'll pause here for a second. Ryan, I don't know. What's that?
Did you put a laugh track to that?
I did.
Jeez.
I put a laugh track to that. I didn't know how to start the segment. I didn't know what to do because, like, I've been trying to get an idea of, like, what's going on and what's realistic to have going on. And it's just, like, it is crazy where we were in August talking about, like, how many top prospects they could get to campus. And now it's like, can they get their own prospects to come back to campus? So I guess what is the plan for this weekend? What is the plan for them against Indiana in their last primetime big matchup of the season?
Get as many guys as you can, which they're doing. I mean, right now it's only about 2 dozen players, and there'll be a little more than that. Don't get me wrong; that's just who I have confirmed. I wouldn't be shocked if it gets a little bit closer to 30 by Saturday. Look, they would love to get as many of their current commits on campus as they can. A lot of those guys have visits elsewhere. It is what it is at this point, and they understand that. They are bringing back Marlon Bright this weekend, which is, I think, an encouraging sign. Marlon's also one of those guys that we've known for a long time would love to stick with Penn State. Just whether there's a hire, before the early signing period or not is TBD. And he definitely wants to sign in the early signing period. He doesn't really want to drag this out. Of course, let's see where things stand. Right when we get up to that bubble, maybe things will be a little different. But, Marlon certainly wants to stick with Penn State. Just went to Illinois last weekend and has an OV to Washington next weekend. So 2 quality options there in the Big Ten for Marlon. When we look beyond that, though, there's a handful of quality players, I think, for 2027. Not a lot of guys who hold a Penn State offer at the moment, but guys that I certainly could see getting a Penn State offer, at least from the previous staff, at some point down the road. Ryan Robbins is an intriguing looking offensive tackle out of Upper St. Clair. A guy I've been doing a little bit on. He camped at Penn State, 6'7", 280, has a lot of the measurables that Trout really likes. Whether he would get an offer right now or not, it's kind of TBD. I mean, let me clarify again. If there wasn't a coaching change going on, I don't know how many of these guys they're really going to offer for whatever reason at the moment. But he has picked up Pitt, Nebraska, and Syracuse all in the last month. That tells me the coaches are seeing something that they really like on his junior season film and all that. He has a Pitt legacy as well, so I don't know how much that'll have an impact down the road. But just one of those kind of guys out in Western Pennsylvania who not ranked right now, all those kind of things, but certainly is grabbing the attention of Power 4 schools within the region and all that. So just another of those guys I could see maybe taking off a little bit, when we get to January and all that kind of stuff when coaches can hit the road. Kevin Parker's coming back not coming back to campus this weekend. This will be, I think, his first visit. Quarterback out of Denby in Newport News, Virginia, 6'1", 175. Whether he's a quarterback long-term, I'm not exactly sure. Threw for 1,600 yards, rushed for another almost 600 this year. Just a really good athlete. He has interest from schools as far as, Division I basketball and things like that as well. So I think it speaks highly to, his potential. But again, he was a guy at one point I was curious to see if Penn State would maybe make a move on as far as 2027 quarterbacks go. Kind of digging on him a little bit more. I still think there's a lot to learn about his power forward quarterback potential. But, when it comes to playing wide receiver or DB or wherever it may be, that athleticism is there. And, that's a reason for Penn State to stay on him and keep recruiting him hard, all those kind of things. One other guy I want to mention too, Jamison Exenor, Jeff's younger brother. Up to 5 offers now. Unfortunately for him, though, he missed a lot I think he only played maybe 3 games or so. But you can see the athleticism there that his brother has. He's kind of being looked more as a defensive end. The unfortunate thing was when you kind of miss your junior season, which is a massively important season from a recruiting. One. Yeah, I could see a lot of schools maybe wanting him to camp moving forward. So that'll be something to maybe keep an eye on down the road. This is one other guy I'll mention too is Cam Toomey, another 2028 prospect that we got a really good look at this year. He camped. Did he camp twice, D. Frank? I know he camped that one time. I think it was a final camp.
I don't remember what I had for dinner yesterday. I don't remember.
Yeah, I just remember you and I watching him closely.
Oh yeah, Cam Toomey. Yes, I believe he was there twice because he was there early and then he was there for the whiteout camp, I believe.
Thought so. Yeah. But I mean, really good looking prospect. We have him as an edge right now, 6'3", 245. I mean, that screams he's going to grow into an interior defensive lineman down the road. But
I always forget who my favorites are after recruiting season. Once we get into the season, I apologize.
You're good. Certainly a guy I think that's on pace to be a 4-star player. We have him as a 3-star 88 right now at Rivals, but that's kind of just how Rivals operates with a lot of those younger guys. But he was on the top 100 watch list and all those kind of things, and you can see there 24/7 already has him as a top 100 player. So, long way to go, obviously. Let's see what other schools come calling. But, Penn State's current staff at least put themselves in a really good position early on with Cam, and he clearly has a lot of interest. Let's see how that goes now in the months ahead.
So some of the other conversations around the recruiting is, those are the players coming this weekend, but players are also going other places, guys that have committed to other that are committed to Penn State but are visiting other programs. And I think significant losses already happened. You don't want to understate Jasir Rogers leaving the program, but I think gut check time is coming up here for the Nittany Lions. Kevin Brown visiting Ohio State. We knew about that. You've been tracking his visits to West Virginia. Messiah Mickens has been out, and then Matt Sieg going on official visits as well. These are some of the most committed guys to the program. And obviously they're doing their due diligence, but I guess is the worst yet to come for Penn State, or how are you viewing these things? And what's the latest here?
I just want to clarify one thing real quick. Mickens actually hasn't been out yet. So he put out a photo last week of him in an Oklahoma jersey, and certainly looked like he was on an OV because we knew Kevin Brown was on a midweek OV, right? And we knew Harrisburg had a bye. Only to learn that was a visit he took, I think, 2 years ago. So he actually hasn't been out yet. And it's interesting, though, because, again, I keep coming back to, Harrisburg's going to be playing a lot on Saturdays these next couple of weeks. So how does he fit those visits in? It worked for Kevin to take a midweek OV during a bye week because, obviously, it's a bye week. You're not game planning for your next playoff opponent. Well, that shouldn't be the case for Harrisburg from here on out, at least through the early signing period. So whether Messiah is able to squeeze in a midweek when he's, probably should be with his team or whatever it may be, time will tell. But it does certainly feel like Oklahoma is the team to watch there, though. That's something I kind of dug on a little bit throughout the week. And again, he hasn't visited anywhere yet. South Carolina is also in the mix. I believe Indiana as well. But just the vibe I get is he's certainly most interested in Oklahoma, and Oklahoma certainly seems to be aggressively pursuing him at the moment. So I want to just jump. Go ahead.
I was just going to say I'm surprised by that. I would have thought that Notre Dame would be the first name out of your mouth, and
I just think that they're full. Yeah.
No.
Notre Dame's full. I think certainly J1 had a lot of interest there, but they're at a point now where their class is basically full. I think they have 2 running backs already committed, I believe, and it is kind of what it is at this point. With Kevin Brown, certainly that Ohio State visit is looming large at the moment, and it's interesting because he was very close to not taking it. We talked Thursday night, and he was like, "Yeah, it's doubtful," and I put that on the board. And of course, but thank God I circled back Friday morning before I put out our little notebook because he's like, "Oh yeah, last minute decision. I am going." And sure enough, that last minute decision, looks pretty good for the Buckeyes at the moment. So he wants to take an OV to Ohio State. They want him to take an OV, but again, it comes back to where is that going to fit on their schedule? I mean, as long as Harrisburg wins tomorrow, they're playing my alma mater, CD. We've dropped off quite a bit, so they should win tomorrow. That they'll be playing again next Saturday, and next Saturday's the UCLA game for Ohio State, and that's been talked about a good bit. I believe Elijah Littlejohn, by the way, is still expected to take an OV to Ohio State next weekend. So it's just all about where those two Harrisburg guys can fit in visits here in the weeks moving forward, because Harrisburg's certainly the favorite to at least reach the semifinals and play whoever comes out of the WPIAL.
I was trying to give Stephen Light a pep talk in the chat, so I apologize. Did you mention Matt Sieg?
I haven't yet, no. West Virginia visits out there now. That he's going to take an OV to West Virginia that final weekend. I think it's November 29th to 30th. Obviously, Sieg and Fort Cherry have played in the WPIAL championship the last couple of years. That will be November 22nd, I believe. So I don't expect anything to happen there. He is going to Notre Dame this weekend for an unofficial visit, but kind of like with Mickens, I get the vibe that Notre Dame is interested in Sieg, excuse me, but their class is really full. I mean, they have 3 safeties committed already and 5 freshman scholarship safeties on their current roster, right? So it's just not a position that they really need at the moment. The fact they're bringing him out, shows that they're still very interested in his skill set and how he'd fit the program. It's just whether they would make that late decision to add him, when they have an abundance already at that position. So keep an eye on that moving forward. But certainly Pitt, Indiana, West Virginia seem to be all in on Sieg.
Oh darn! If you're a Notre Dame fan, oh darn, we can't have this really great underrated prospect because we already got the highly rated ones in the class this summer. Fitz, it looked like a couple minutes ago you had something that you were thinking about. Was there something you wanted to react to? No?
That's a bad read on your part. I don't even know what I was thinking about. No. Daryl Carey flipped to Maryland last night. That's interesting. That's a tough one. I'm very curious to see this group that has flipped away, if there's any window that you could possibly get them back. Because I know, Carey, Alex Haskell flipped to Syracuse. Those are, different situations. I'm fascinated by I can't describe it other than toxicity here, but like some of these guys are treating Penn State like it's not going to have a program in January. And that's really interesting to me. So flipping to Syracuse, which has a worse record than Penn State right now, flipping to Maryland, who Mike Loxley might get fired. Like there's a lot of really interesting things. And it just goes to show you how much a staff and how much a head coach, having those guys on board and having those relationships with those guys means, because it's more about picking the staff. It's more about picking the coaches than it is picking the institution right now. And it used to be a little bit more balanced there. So I'm fascinated to see how this is going to play out. You mentioned Kevin Brown, Ohio State. That would be a tough pill to swallow. But Ryan, we're kind of on the same page with a handful of these guys. We still think they want to go to Penn State. We think Matt Sieg wants to go to Penn State. He's a Penn State family. He was one of the first commits and things of that nature. So you've got a lot going for you in that. But are you going to have the window? Can you have someone in place, whether it be a guy that would be hired on November 30th on the Sunday at the last weekend of the season to, at the very least, get these guys not to sign on that Wednesday with another school? I mean, that's kind of where that grind is going to come in. Ryan, you're not going to sleep if that happens from Sunday till Thursday. So sorry in advance, but that's where I'm looking right now. And I'm also looking at the levels of where some of these players are being pursued. And hey, Kevin Brown, Ohio State, I get it. Like, I absolutely get it. Some of these other programs that they're going out to visit, whether or not Penn State hires the top possible guy for the job, Penn State's still going to be an upper echelon program, and these programs are not. And that's what's fascinating to me, is when you're out there looking as a prospect, looking for stability, you are kind of forgetting the last 16 months of the process. Yeah. That's just the interesting part of this to me.
Or as a young person, probably don't have the full scope of like the instability at a place like Syracuse, or the instability at other programs where Penn State has been very consistent through time. Now, obviously, the future could be very different. Like we are in a new era of college football, and Penn State is now entering the fray. I guess the thing that I hear a lot from Penn State fans, and I just want you guys to reiterate this, of like, you mentioned Matt Sieg, Kevin Brown, Messiah Mickens. They all clearly want to go to Penn State. Kevin Brown aside, and let's maybe focus on a guy like Daryl Carey or some of the other guys that have flipped to other schools. If Penn State were to get a top coach, there has to be a reasonable confidence that the program will still want them. Right. I mean, this is what the due diligence is. It's not just like having an exit strategy. It's like if it doesn't fit between me and the coach or me and the scheme of what happens next, I need to have something. So there's this feeling of disloyalty that everyone wants it to be just about Penn State, because that's why Penn State fans love Penn State, because it's about the place, it's about the team, it's about the colors, it's about the logo, it's about all that stuff. But for these players, like, they might not be invited, it seems. Is that fair, Fitz?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you got to look out for yourself first. I mean, it depends on, so you grab a coach from a program that is probably slightly below you in the pecking order, which he's going to maybe bring some of his own guys, but you're still stepping up to where Penn State is, and Penn State's class, as mid as we kind of had it before all this stuff. Like, it was, you know, it was some good players in that class, but also some, I should not say questionable, but also some guys that were just like, they may or might not be above the line. So it's still a step up there. And you still look at, if Penn State is drawing somebody from close to that line, you're probably taking him away from a coach or a program that Penn State's looking at right now for a head coach. So I think it's just, there's tiers here. There's tiers involved in all this. There's tiers involved in where these guys are going. There's tiers involved in the prospects, what they're looking at. And there's tiers involved in their status. So like the committed and looking around, the committed and actually taking official visits, the guys that are looking around, not all of them are taking official visits. Like, they may look like they're taking official visits, but some of those are unofficial visits, which tells you something too, you know, like there's all these different levels here. Now, if you've decommitted, like, there's guys that have flipped, Jasir Rogers, you know, to Oklahoma, Haskell to Syracuse, Darryl Carey to Maryland. Ryan, am I missing any right there?
Yeah. Well, Julian Peterson hasn't committed. Jazeel Hart to North Carolina. I think it was one more. I was reading over in notes. Sorry.
Yeah. So if you've made that step to decommit, it's like a Davion Brown, like a LeVar Keys, then you're probably like further away. But every tier you go up is a better chance that these guys would stick, I would say. I made a post about it on the Lions Den last night. I think you should read that instead of trying to decipher what the hell I just said, because I don't even know. So
perfect.
But definitely check it out.
Yeah, join us just for $1 for 7 days of access. You can get all these context, conversations, and nuance on the message board, where we don't have 60 minutes to have a conversation, and some of us are better in print than we are in verbal communication, and I am in that bucket sometimes. Ryan, you have a thought here?
Yeah, I would continue this here for a little bit. We got some time, and no, do we really care about talk about Indiana predictions? I don't. But anyway, moving on.
I just need 3 minutes at the end with your predictions for the tailgate show. That's all I need.
I don't think they're going to win. Moving on. No, but seriously, like, so a couple things I'll say here. One is the whole, you know, will my son still be accepted at Penn State under the new coach, I think has a lot of parents worried. That's one thing I've talked to 4 or 5 parents now, I would say, in the last 10 days. And I keep coming back to, when they ask me about that, I say in 2018, I would agree with that a bit more, but you got to remember, this is the transfer portal era. And I think a lot of times because of the portal, it's made it a lot easier for schools to, quote unquote, take a chance on players and things like that. And you're looking at a situation now where there is certainly quite a few talented guys who would want to stick around. And I also believe that when you add in the fact that December is a dead period, and that wherever this coach comes from, whomever he is and whomever is committed to him, those guys aren't going, if it's after December 1, they're not going to be able to take an official or an unofficial visit with the staff. They can fly up here on their own and walk around campus and check it out on their own if they want. But that's going to make it very difficult, in my opinion, or more difficult than it should be, for whatever Coach X to bring in, recruit X, Y, and Z from his former school. That's those, especially those guys have never been to Penn State before. So when you add in that and take that into consideration, and then you take in consideration, it's not like Penn State's recruiting terribly. They do find talent. They have always focused on athleticism and potential and development and those things. I think that makes it easier for the next coach to keep a lot of these guys around. And, I know that there's fits and different scheme things that, may not work for a couple of those guys, but I'd still be pretty surprised if a coach came in here and didn't want to sign a Matt Sieg, a Marlon Bright, even Isaac Chikwara, some of these guys who I understand maybe aren't rated as highly and things like that, but there's certainly enough potential there. And you got to have, it's not like James hasn't done a good job at scouting and recruiting over the years. Like, I think that makes it a little easier for a new coach to take that over. You don't think so?
Ryan, I'm just kidding.
I think
I'm
they've done a very good
joking,
job.
but like,
yeah,
we're at the point where everything is bad and everything in the past was bad
Only
and everything in the
2025
future is bad.
exists. Yes.
Yeah,
So-
only this moment exists.
I just think that December dead period thing is what makes it easier for a coach to be like, yeah, you got to try and have some sort of scholarship balance. And I understand they're going to go for young guys in the portal, but you don't want to be in a situation where you're signing 3 guys in the 2026 class. You got to have some balance.
Yeah, you got to have some of that, but also you are taking a new job to win in 2026 too. This is not a situation where Penn State's not in a position where they can take 3 years as a runway. I try to not mention that word on here, as a runway to getting good again. And I think that's what you look at, especially with the 105 limit. Like, those guys are not going to be grandfathered in anymore. So like the 100 and whatever, 120 or whatever, that's pretty much off the table because you're going to see some turnover after this year. A good bit of turnover after this year. So I think that that's what you're looking at with how this is going to come together is, yes, you want to sign some 2026 guys to have some balance, but again, that's the collateral damage here. That's the
it's 80-20. I'm not saying
the same thing. Yeah.
We're talking high school recruiting right now. That's still 20% of what matters. You know what I mean? Like, I understand that that is way lower, but of that, graph or whatever you want to put it, like, it's still, you still want to try and get something in there. And, if you have some quality kids who are quality players, good on the field, off the field, everything that Penn State still wants to represent, and I think will still prioritize representing moving forward. I find it hard. I just find it hard to believe that a Marlon Bright, a Matt Sieg, we know Kevin Brown, Mickens, whoever it may be, like, I don't know why a new coach wouldn't at least give him a year to figure out.
So now we're out in the weeds, and I'm just curious about this because Fitz, you just said competing in 2026, and certainly things haven't gone right in 2025, but the roster is still talented. If Pat Kraft is serious about playing the game in modern college football and reloading every year and being aggressive, how much of a lift is it going to be monetarily to do that this year? Is that real? Like, is that realistic? Because you're going to have a new coach coming in, and if they are fishing in the pond that they want, do they have to sacrifice for a year? Like, I'm having a hard time. And obviously the story is not written yet. So we don't know what they're going to be able to do in the portal. We don't know what they're going to be able to do with this recruiting class. But there does seem to be a big uphill battle to fulfill all of those promises and things that Pat Kraft said a month ago in 2026 specifically. And I think some fans are like on board with we'll be 8-4 or whatever it is next year. But I don't know that there's a lot of people that think what you just said necessarily. So I guess, like, how do you see that working out if that is something they're going to try?
I was listening to your little filibuster there, and I was like, how am I going to tell everyone to not pay attention to Indiana and not think that Cignetti is the way, like, that is an actual blueprint? And as soon as you did, somebody put it in the chat that, hey, Indiana was able to do it. Okay, great. And it's again, we talked about it before. It's been a phenomenal run, is very much the exception to the rule. But that's the model, right? To find a guy that can, bring some of whatever he's got from behind him, and then also hit the portal and scout. And I think I said it on the show. Was it earlier this week or maybe last week, or maybe all the weeks are running together? I'm not sure. But Pat Kraft, his status is on the line here. He's got to make a good hire, and he's got to back that up with funding that big hire, not so much like from a coaching salary position, but from a overspending to make sure that you're right position. Like maybe not a Texas A&M overspending, but like being able to go out and spend whatever you need to get a quarterback in here that bridges the gap for the entire team. And hey, that's such an important method for some of these programs that had success right away. And there's certainly plenty of holes in the roster, but also you don't know what this roster is going to look like in January. Like, you don't know what this roster is going to look like for spring ball. You don't know what this roster is going to look like next August. Like, there's so many questions there. And in college football, when we play in 18-team mega conferences that give you 9 game conference schedules, but most of those teams are below you on the pecking order. Yeah, there's a window there. There's absolutely a window there to be okay. I don't think they're going to be great, but I can't sit here and tell you that because I don't know what the roster is going to look like next August. So that is where sort of your hope should lie if you're a Penn State fan, is that he's going to make a hire, but not only make the hire that's best for Penn State, but give him the funds to work with to sort of just like, I don't want to say splash the pot here, but like give yourself a nice little start. Like, get out of college debt free, like that type of thing where you've got the head start on everyone else. And that's kind of how you're approaching this if you're Pat Kraft, I feel, because so much of this with the stadium and the entertainment value and the ability to be one of those teams, even though you're not going to be Indiana, who's an exception to the rule for the 19th time, is like the ultimate goal.
I do want to take things you can learn from translatable situations, though, because Indiana and Oregon, just listening to what you're talking about with quarterback being very important, one of the reasons that they've had so much success at Oregon is because the offense is fundamentally fairly simple. There's a lot of screens, RPOs, one-read decisions, and yes, you would like to be able to get to a full offense and build off of those things. And I think you're seeing a little bit with Dante Moore. It's been simpler than I expected for him in his first year. Kirk Cignetti, and I'm not trying to take anything away from Fernando Mendoza because he is doing so well at everything. Looking through the data, watching him on film, his reads are good, and he is decisive and quick and all those things. But he's got 500 yards just on RPOs. And RPOs are a skill, but they are a skill that doesn't require you to know a lot about the offense. You need to be able to read, is the will linebacker crashing? And then if yes, throw. If not, give. And so we've seen quarterbacks that aren't good at it, but if you know how to teach it and you find a guy who's willing to throw it and, willing to make those decisions and go out there on a limb and go against the called run play, there are some things about what you might be looking for in a style of offense that translates quicker than one for an offensive coordinator. Let's say like Joe Brady, right? So he's coming from the NFL. I know he's coached in college, but that was a very vertical passing attack that he had at LSU. There are nuances to this conversation about what do you want for year one versus what you want long term. And one of the reasons I haven't been like a huge fan of Will Stein and the Oregon connection is because everyone says he's great at fostering these quarterbacks, and that may be true. But I also know the offense, I find it boring. I find it to be, simplistic in a college football sense that is correct, of like, you don't have to do NFL level stuff to win at college football. You need to do simple stuff really fast and be better than everybody else, which is what they had at Oregon, which is a lot of speed in kind of like the Clemson from the 2010s model of like, we're going to run something simple with better athletes than you. And I would be concerned about like some of these schemes that you think are going to work. Again, Penn State might not have the best athletes in the country to fill those schemes. So just a random tangent here to end this conversation, because we do have to get into Indiana and Penn State. Ryan, I'm sorry. I apologize, but we do have a contractual obligation. I put it in the promo, put it in the rundown, put it on the website. We're going to talk about Indiana. So first off, I want to get your thoughts here, Fitz, on what Indiana does and how you think they match up with Penn State. You can pick dealer's choice, offense or defense.
Yeah, I think I'll go with offense because they do a lot of different things to spread the ball around to different. I think they've got 4 different leading rushers this year in their 8 or 9 games so far, which one was a blowout, and that was a sort of an aberration. But they share the ball through their backs. They keep their backs fresh. They use these guys, as you mentioned, in the RPO, and that has made everyone a little bit more open. And that's what I'm kind of concerned about with Penn State is when they've had to face something like that, when they've had to think on the fly. This is not a defense that has handled the change well to a very Thinkman's defense, if that makes sense. T. Frank, is that a way to look at Penn State's defense right now? So to make them think even more, that could be a problem for Penn State. And as I mentioned, Kirk Cignetti probably going to want to run the score up. He's been in Pennsylvania for a long time. He's not been a Penn State guy. We said that at the outset of the search when he got that extension. Like, there was a lot of doubt on our end that he would not entertain Penn State, because I think everybody's open to listening. But he was not James Franklin from Neshaminy that grew up wanting to coach Penn State type thing. So like I think that can be very different. So just a lot of talent everywhere. They're banged up, especially you look on the outside. I think Elijah Surratt's going to play, but they've had issues with keeping some of their guys healthy. Is that the latest on Surratt?
So the thing I saw earlier this week was he's dealing with hamstrings. So the problem with hamstrings is they don't heal quickly, and you can kind of play through them. So he's not even. I think he's very good, and he brings a lot of balance to the offense. But the other guy, number 3, is the one that I think is the most dangerous of the two, given what they want to do on offense and what you just talked about with the RPOs. But yeah, the last thing I heard is he was day to day.
Yeah, sounds like Surratt's going to join you on Fridays for leg day. No, I think you just got so many threats there, and what we saw from Penn State's corners last week is not inspiring confidence there. So I think I would go with that. When you look at what they've got, and T. Frank and I talked about this a little bit off air this morning, they're into their depth a little bit more. So they're playing a couple different offensive linemen, a couple different guards. So you might have an opportunity there to get a stop based on maybe they're not at peak form, but they've scored 55 points the last 2 weeks. So yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I've got, we're going to get predictions here. I've got,
this is how it works, guys. Just so we all know, like I use this segment on the Tailgate Show. So when I hit the game prediction thing, then that's when we give our game predictions. We're going to talk about the game, and then we're going to give our game predictions and like how we see it playing out. It just helps me out because then I can put that into the Tailgate Show, and that is our final segment before we get into our final segment there. So that's how I like to do these things. I feel like I just got caught with my pants down. I apologize. Ryan.
That's not an image that I needed.
What's up?
Hey. Obviously, I think we all have this going a certain way. What do you see about Indiana that you think is a problem for Penn State?
I think they score a lot of points.
Yeah, 44-12. Is their average score right now in Big Ten play. Obviously, that's been heightened a good bit over the last 2 weekends with them throttling UCLA and Maryland. For me, it's can Penn State. So here's what I'll say: is everybody talked about Fernando Mendoza, absolutely deserved, right? He's crushing it, doing a great job. But one thing I didn't know until kind of research this a little bit is that Indiana has some pretty big splits from passing to rushing game. I think it's like a 60-40 split. I mean, they're rushing the ball. I believe it's top 10 in the country as far as rushing plays. And then I know their passing play percentage is like 128 in the country. So tells me they want to build a ground game. They want to build around that, free up Mendoza to get things going. Yeah. Can Penn State handle that? Can Penn State actually shut down a ground game for a good bit? They did last week against Ohio State for 3 quarters. Well, they have, I think it was 65-ish yards, maybe 70 max. They limited Ohio State through those.
They had 60. They had 61 yards on 3 plays, all of the same style. One of them was the 51-yarder that broke that broke the game open and really put it out of reach.
So I'd just be curious to see if from a rush game perspective, can Penn State bottle them? Because right now Indiana's averaging 5.5 yards per carry. I believe that's I know that's like top 15 in the country or so. It's up there. I think it's 10th, I want to say. So can they bottle that? Can they throttle that? Expand the game? Keep things close. Personally, I feel like obviously that fumble last week, obviously it kept Penn State in the game, and give Wheatley and Amari Campbell a lot of credit for that play. They made that play happen. But if you really look at how last week played out, and maybe it's not fair, it is Ohio State, but it was really one drive for Penn State. They had one really nice drive. Obviously, at the end, they drove 60-plus yards, but it was already kind of late until that pick happened. So can Penn State's offense then, take that, keep it close, get 17 points on the board through 3 quarters, and maybe have it a 24-17 kind of game? Maybe. Personally, I'm kind of looking at like a 17-10, similar last week, first half, but I have them pulling away in the second.
I don't know why I would do this to myself, but today I'm going to probably go seek out the Indiana-Iowa game and look at that, because that is your sort of roadmap, and that's like I still don't get it, and I still don't get how Iowa's where they're at record-wise, because I didn't think they were great, even though they beat Penn State, but they have played Indiana better than anybody, really.
They gave up the game, and they also got the game with pressure. And that was what I noticed in that situation. And the thing that it led me to is Indiana's offensive line is good. Especially their tackles. Their left tackle is exceptional. He's an NFL player. I do find it interesting because you're right, Ryan. The Roman Hemby, 125 carries so far this year. Roman Hemby, by the way, of Maryland fame, who Penn State has bottled up in the past previously, obviously in a different scheme, different situation. But it's all for this team. It's all about the scheme on both sides of the ball. It's a more than the sum of their parts, and they do have some good parts on offense, especially at key positions. But Ryan, the reason, and I knew we were going to kind of get into this situation, so I wanted to do something where I want to explain where I think Penn State has a road to victory. However knife blade it is, here is how this would go. The RPO is built off of running the ball, creating a stimulus for the linebackers to step up, and creating one-on-one situations. So this is one of the reasons Illinois had such a hard time, is because they love going press man coverage and creating one-on-ones and stacking the box, having 5 offensive or defensive linemen. And Indiana thrives in those situations. They get broken tackles in space. So the opposite of that is Jim Knowles' defense. This defense really is set up to stop an RPO offense like Indiana has. So if they were able to play the run better than they did last week and get to some of the concepts and schemes that they want to in the secondary and play their linebackers where they want to, you can take away the RPO and then make them beat you straight up, which is a lot of what Iowa did in that game, is just playing really sound zone defense and not giving up all of those wide open passing lanes. So you can bottle this offense up. How long that happens, can they actually stop the run? That has been the key for every single game this year that we've seen them not be able to unlock defensively for Penn State's offense. This team, and Fitz, this is the problem. This defense gives up a lot of looks downfield, but what they take away, similar to Manny Diaz, I've been saying this all week, is they love chaos and they want to take away short throws that they can predict based on where your receivers are on the field, what zones they're going to go into, and they can flood those zones. But when they do, they leave half the field uncovered, because why would you cover empty grass? Yet if you do get a one-on-one, they can give you explosive plays. So Penn State, in order to win this game, has to throw the ball down the field. That's the key to this game, is actually throwing into the spaces where there are no defenders.
Right.
And how they get there is going to be a wild ride. But that would be how Penn State gets a win here, is they hit shot plays, they get big plays at home, and their defense stops the run. If there has been an opposite day for Penn State to have for what they've done all year, it would be this weekend. So I'm not saying there's a chance. I'm just saying that's how it gets done.
Yeah.
Well, Indiana's also 6th in the country in interceptions per game with 1.6.
Yep.
So be careful with that.
And that's what they're doing, is they're jumping underneath routes, because when you have
For
all
sure.
that pressure, they are first in the Big Ten in unblocked pressure. They get there faster than anybody else because they just make the offense either overload pressures or you don't see coming, players in weird positions. They get that pressure and force the quarterback into a hyper state of decision making, and suddenly you're throwing to a linebacker who just steps in front of it. You've got to get downfield. And Dante Moore, I thought, was going to have an opportunity when I started clicking on the film. They got to Dante Moore and rattled him. This defense rattles people, and that is the part where I'm just like, Penn State has not shown a lot of trust in their quarterback so far. Against this defense, I don't know that they're going to show a lot of trust in their quarterback, which I think leads into their problem. Okay, so Ryan, give me your score prediction. Tell me how you think this plays out.
38-14. Like I said, I could see maybe a 17-14, 21-14 first half. I could see something similar to what we saw last week. But Penn State's also been outscored, 4 consecutive games in the second half. Like, it's a team right now that just, I don't know how much fight there really is, to be honest. And I know, that's not what's coming out of Lash, but what my eyes tell me on the field the last couple of weeks is that there's not a ton of motivation to really go after it and get it. And that's sad. That stinks. I don't like seeing that, because obviously I thought that this was a locker room built on a lot of those things. And right now I don't see it with my eyes. So to me, if Penn State can get some lucky bounces to go their way, maybe they can stay in the first half. But, do you trust Grunkmeyer to throw it down the field, to be aggressive, to do all those things? He's averaged just 119 yards passing through the first 2 games. And I get it. They haven't really let him try to turn loose, but I think if you're doing that against Indiana, you're asking for it to some degree. So 38-14, we'll see where this goes. But, they're going to need some bounces to go their way, no doubt.
Fitz, what do you think how this game plays out? What's your final score?
You made a good point there. And I know we were talking about this earlier about the for lack of a better term, blown coverages, whether it's blown coverages or it's just, we don't think this guy is going to make the third read and actually get down the field because we're putting pressure on him. I mean, you're kind of looking at splitting hairs right there. But Penn State's going to need to hit them, which means Penn State's going to need to throw them, and not confident that that's going to happen. I've got Indiana winning 48-20. I've got more points in this one. Like I said, I think Indiana is going to try and score a lot of points. Not that that's not the goal for most programs, but Indiana, I think, is doing it. Speaking of which, I'm stuck on this conversation with Terry Smith last night, because I just keep coming back to the entire setup of this offense. I assume you asked about the similarities to Manny Diaz's defense. Yep. You talked about them causing havoc and getting pressure. And Terry is talking about first down, second down. And I'm a big down and distance guy, and I'm totally rethinking that after watching Penn State this year, because it almost seems like, and Terry said, it's tough to call plays that way. We've got to get positive yards. We've got to get 4 or 5 yards on first down. And we have a couple downs to chip away at the first down. That to me is just mind-blowing when you talk about the goal of this game is to score points, not to get first downs. And you can see that every drive that Penn State does is they are going for that yellow line that does not exist in real life, but it's out there. And that is the goal, to get to that yellow line. And then when they get to that
yourself
yellow line,
in a box.
Yeah, it is in a very small shoebox, and you're limiting yourself at that point. And that's what's so frustrating to me about watching this offense is there's so much emphasis placed on holding the football and moving it a couple yards at a time. It's like last week, Penn State had to fight for everything that they got against Ohio State offensively. And that's great. And they did a commendable job in the first half, went in trailing by 3 and all that kind of stuff. But you saw how easy it was for Ohio State to find receivers, to go down the field, to do all these things. And offenses are not that different. Like offenses in general, from Pop Warner's single wing till now, are not like, they're all structured in a similar manner. You land up.
Can I throw in just an example here? The touchdown that went viral on social media about Ryan Day saying they put it in at halftime, or not the touchdown, the long pass to Jeremiah Smith. That is a concept Penn State has in their playbook, and they ran to Trey Wallace last year. Like, I've seen that. Everyone runs that, of an under and then a deep post or a go against quarters, because you get one-on-one coverage. They didn't even get the one-on-one coverage. They just got guy faster than other guys. But yeah, it's the same stuff even that they put in at halftime. So I didn't mean to slow your roll, but you nailed it, of like, it's the same stuff everywhere.
Yeah, it's the same stuff, and you just, you have different players and things like that. And I understand you wrote earlier this week about hiding Grunkmeyer, and you don't want to put him in a bad situation, and I get that. Yeah. But this is not a Grunkmeyer thing. This is an entire season type thing where you're trying to, plow a little bit at a time. And if you have a run game that can pick up 9-10 yards in not at will, but in chunks like Indiana can, okay, that makes some sense. But Penn State does not have that, and Penn State has found itself in the situation it is in mostly because of its offense. And that's it's going to be a lot to overcome, and especially this weekend against a really good team. And I was talking to Zach Osterman of the Indy Star on his show, Mind the Banners, this week. And we talked about, is there hope for Penn State fans right now? It's kind of like, get past this peak, this climax of the season, which the 3-game stretch, Iowa, Ohio State, Indiana. And then you've got an opportunity to go 6-6 on the back end. But so I think I very, very much feel that way in terms of looking at what Penn State has to do this week is to get to next week. And that's pretty depressing when you talk about all the good football we've covered over the years.
Yeah. You laid it out perfectly, of like how Penn State's operating on offense this year, and my lack of belief that they're actually going to throw the ball down the field. And I don't mean this in the sense of Terry Smith here, but defensive-minded coaches. Usually they come from the defensive side of the ball, but even Penn State this year has been a defensive-minded team on offense. You play small, you lose small, and sometimes you lose big against a team that wants to take those things away. I don't think Penn State scores a touchdown. I think they'll be lucky to get 9 points in this game unless they do something different. They chuck the ball deep and they let the quarterback make some of those big throws that I know, based on what I've seen from him of his recruiting, he wants to make. 42-9, and I think the 42 is a little bit low, if I'm being honest. I think you're a little closer to it, 48. I just was thinking, like, I don't want to be so far out there that I'm, overshooting the moon. But I've been undershooting for most of the year when it comes
when
to
Penn
like
State
Penn
pulls
State.
the upset of the college football season, then yeah, we're great. I mean,
we were closer.
All
All right, guys.
Hey, one thing here, I think Terry Smith does want to throw it downfield. I really do. And I don't think he's making those calls, but I'm thinking he's trying to tell everybody within earshot that he wants to throw it downfield, and they're just not doing it. So,
yeah. Well, hopefully it's the quarterback throwing it downfield this week. That would be an improvement. So thank you guys for all of your time, all of your efforts, and Ryan, I know that this has been a rough time of year for you covering recruiting. You do a great job here on the show.
Pretty easy right now. Talk to me in January. That's going to be rough.
But I mean, like, having interesting things to talk about here. I think this was a good show. We had interesting things to discuss. And as much as Stephen Light is saying, like, we're in purgatory until the end of the season, we're still going to provide you the best value and insight you can here for a free podcast. And, of course, there is more value and insight over at bluewhiteillustrated.com. I always forget to do this because I just, like, it just goes into auto-fill on my head. 9 a.m. tailgate show outside the Bryce Jordan Center. Come say hi. Bring me hand warmers because I am now a weak person. I am no longer a lake effect snow person. I am now this soft person that's been living in State College in central Pennsylvania for most of my life at this point. So we're going to be outside talking Penn State football for 90 minutes, 9 a.m. on Saturday morning. Hope to see you there. We'll be doing that. Hope to see you enjoy the game, come to the game, and stop by. I know it's super early, but we'll have a good time. And, of course, full coverage at bluewhiteillustrated.com for you pre, during, and post-game. For Sean Fitz and Ryan Snyder, I'm Thomas Ryan Carr. We'll talk.